Hello, hello. Here we are again, coming to you from the Paranormal World Show. You know, the show that is for the thinking global citizen, the one that is not afraid to step outside of the box and find out what in the world is out there that I have not been told about. There's another world out there, and we're going to hear about that other world tonight. And yeah, my name is Aage, and I'm the host here. And we're going out on 44 different platforms around the world. So if you are watching on YouTube, that's a good place to be because that's the only place we are able to monitor the chat room. And if you have questions, you can always just type a question in there, but type it into capital letters so we can see it easier as a question, and then we can answer and we can communicate right there on the show. And for those of you that like to find out how to connect with myself and also Nori Love on the Broadcast Team Alpha show with me, you can send us a message to our website, which is broadcastteamalpha.com. We'll see the message and we'll get back to you. So, and we're also transmitting on the Conscious Awakening Network. The wonderful people over there on that platform, they have about 50 different shows about stuff that you want to know about. So go visit them and check them out, and you're going to like what is there. And then Nori and I also created a spiritual think tank I want to tell you about, because we've done this for 3 years. And we have done incredible things. It seems like we're creating out of seemingly nothing sometimes. Things just shows up. It cannot be explained by Newtonian physics. If you dive deep into quantum mechanics, you may find some solutions to your questions in regard to that. But when things just shows up out of the unified field in your life and you have no idea where it comes from, that gets interesting. So anyway, I want to introduce the guest for us a little bit here. We have a gentleman from the Netherlands in Europe, and his name is Gerard Aartsen. I hope I pronounced that right, because he has 2 A's, just like in the beginning of his name, and I have the same thing. And that's a different, in Norway, where I come, that's an O. And I think he's got the same situation, maybe over there. I don't know. Well, he has written 8 books and in the UFO and consciousness genre. And he is a teacher trainer, and he has studied ageless wisdom for a long time. And I think there's more to this story about him. Maybe, Gerard, welcome to the show. Maybe you could expand a little bit on what you have been involved with over the years lately.
Thank you, Aage, and thank you for having me. Yes, well, my day job is being a teacher trainer at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, the English program. But for even longer, I've been a student of the ageless wisdom teaching. And some people may know that that was first reintroduced to the modern world by Helena P. Blavatsky in her books Isis Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine. And her teachings were expanded on by Alice Bailey in the early 20th century, and later Benjamin Creme and several others as well. And these teachings really are they are like a synthesis of science and philosophy and religion. And they are about the evolution of consciousness and the fact that it was maybe not the first time, but the first time that a scientific approach, a more academic approach to questions, life questions such as reincarnation and the spirit world, and you know, the huge cycles on planet Earth, you know, where previous continents, previous civilizations came up and disappeared, such as Lemuria and Atlantis, are all described and treated to show and elucidate the fact that we are not just blips on the cosmic scale, but we are individual units of consciousness that go through seemingly endless cycles of incarnation and reincarnation in order to find our way back and to reconnect with the source of consciousness. And you know, one fun fact, of course, is that the origin of the word religion, religare, means to reconnect, and the same actually goes in Sanskrit for yoga,
Yeah.
yogam, root of yoga. So you know, the Ages of Wisdom teaching are meant to help modern mankind, you know, with its more mental approach to life, and more inquiring mind than say the people had 2,000 years ago, to find answers.
Yeah.
And she also revealed the fact that the evolution of consciousness doesn't stop with the emergence of the mineral, the vegetable, and the animal and the human kingdom, but continues from the human kingdom onward into, you know, what we might call spiritual kingdom,
Yeah.
where which is populated by people who are no longer strictly human, but who have transcended the human state of consciousness.
Yeah.
And sometimes they are regarded as the teachers of the race, of the human race, and known as the masters of wisdom.
Yeah.
And they appear from time to time to guide and inspire humanity to find, you know, when we are
Yeah.
losing our way, to find our way back.
Yeah.
So, in a nutshell, that's the Ages Wisdom teaching.
Yeah, I think there's some form of guidance behind the curtain here, and that's probably what you talk about in one of your books about the sea of consciousness.
Well, not exactly, because in the Sea of Consciousness, I republished a lost book by George Adamski that
Oh,
viewers may remember was the first contactee of the 1950s,
yeah,
UFO contactee, much maligned and derided and ridiculed. But my research shows that that was all based on people who didn't know what they were talking about. And his debut book, his first book publication, that was long before he became known as a UFO contactee, and it was published in 1932. And it was titled The Invisible Ocean. So I included the integral text of that in my book, The Sea of Consciousness. And he describes the sea of consciousness as the foundation, the nature of the reality that we live in.
yeah,
And the interesting thing is, if you look at quantum mechanics and the beginning of quantum mechanics, Max Planck, the famous physicist, came to the conclusion somewhere in the 1920s, or at least somewhere before the Second World War, that there are no such things as physical particles that form the basis of our objective reality. He concluded that there are no physical particles, but only minute bundles of energy, which he called quanta, hence the name quantum mechanics, quantum
yeah,
science. And he said these are arranged in such a way that to us, in our peak frequency, so to speak, they look solid. So the table, the desk that you are sitting at and that I'm sitting at look very solid, but the distance between what we can see as the smallest particles, the distance between those are of a galactic order of magnitude. So
Yeah.
there's more nothing than something in those atoms that make up the physical objects of our objective reality.
Yeah,
Um,
it's same.
and he said, Max Planck said, there must be an intelligent mind behind the arranging of how these bundles of energy are arranged. And it was really remarkable to see that George Adamski, in his very first book, of course, there were no popular scientific publications about quantum mechanics at the time, but he wrote very much the same thing. He started as a metaphysics teacher, George Adamski.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, you're talking about George Adamski. Talk to us a little bit about his extraterrestrial contact, because he had so many of them. He was taken onto the ships. That was no abduction. He was invited. And they went, even they flew around the moon, and he took pictures that we can see. So talk a little bit about this.
Yes. Where do I start? George Adamski, yes. Well, abduction, you mentioned it was not an abduction. I think it's important to note that throughout the 1950s, people came forward. George Adamski was the first one to share their stories, experiences of contact with extraterrestrial visitors. Through books, talks. Adamski was very open to the public. He had a cafe on Palomar Mountain with some of his associates and his wife and some of his associates, where every Thursday and Sunday people would come and gather and ask questions, and he would answer them. And in 1959, he went on a world lecture tour that took him to various continents, including Australia, New Zealand, and Europe as well. And his first contact happened in November 1952, and he describes that in his part of the book, "Flying Saucers Have Landed." Now, there are several people who describe themselves as UFO historians, but the real first historian in that respect was Desmond Leslie, an Irish English aristocrat, who compiled an overview going all the way back to ancient Indian times and Old Testament times, describing sightings of celestial craft and meetings with celestial beings, people from the heavens, up until the 1950s. And that formed the first part of Flying Saucers Have Landed. And Adamski's description of his experience in November 52 was attached to that as a second part. That book came out in 1953. And it was translated in at least 12 languages. It was reprinted many, many times in the US and the UK. So he soon became a world famous figure.
Yep.
And that, of course, attracted no shortage of criticism and ridicule, etc.
Yeah.
And the people, people actually still say that Adamski just jumped the bandwagon because there was fame and money to be had when you claim to have had contact with space visitors. But the fact is, Adamski installed his first telescope when he was still a metaphysics teacher in Laguna Beach in 1938. He wrote a pamphlet before the famous sightings by Kenneth Arnold in 1947 and before the Roswell crash in 1947. He wrote a pamphlet called "The Possibility of Life on Other Planets" in 1946. He was the first to come forward with his story of contact. So he didn't jump the bandwagon. Adamski was the bandwagon.
Yeah.
You know, um, again, people who criticize Adamski's claims, yes, there are many claims that cannot be verified. But what do you expect in such an area of mystery? And these visitors from space, they are coming here very carefully. They're treading very carefully so as not to upset our society, and making sure that our structures don't collapse. The stock markets, etc. Because all of a sudden we are confronted, humanity would be confronted with the reality that we're not alone in the universe.
Yeah.
People of sound mind would understand that as a fact, but it has been denied ever since the 1950s, ever since Adamski, Truman Bethune, Buck Nelson, Howard Menger, Daniel Fry. That's just a bunch of them in the United States, but many other people in other parts of the world as well came forward, and because they were asked to share the information they received from the visitors who contacted them, to call on humanity for international cooperation to avert nuclear confrontation. This was during of course, the Cold War,
Yeah.
when governments depended on the public support for the huge expenditure on nuclear weapons, developing new weapons, nuclear tests, etc. And there were these people out of nowhere, mostly no formal education to speak of, drawing huge crowds that were interested in psychological freedom from fear, because that's what it was, that Cold War. A clash between ideologies, capitalism and communism. So that was not conducive to governments and the military's interests.
Yeah.
During the public funds needed to sustain and build up the weapons arsenal. And
Now
so from that time on, the disinformation campaign started.
Yeah, the extraterrestrials that he was dealing with, they looked just like us, didn't they?
Yes, yes.
Were they? Would you consider them? This is a question that I've had. The extraterrestrial that look like us come here are very, extremely intelligent. Do you think that they have a brain and a physiology like us, or do you think they have maybe an electronic interface, maybe where they can get information from the field or outside of themselves to supplement their intelligence in the moment if they're using it? Because that's what we're trying now.
According to the descriptions of not just George Adamski, but also his fellow contactees and other people around the world who have been in contact also since the 1950s. A famous case in Italy, known as the friendship case. These visitors are people like us. Their physiology is very similar, at least in build. Of course, I've not had the privilege of looking inside their skulls. I don't know if they have a brain, but according to the original contactees and their information, the information that was available before the disinformation campaign was set in motion. These are very human beings, except they are more highly evolved. They're from planets that are more highly evolved because their human race on their planet hasn't made the mistakes that we on Earth have made over millennia and hundreds of thousands of years. So they are human. They may have created robots that operate in a way that you describe. But I think more importantly, the more evolved you are as a human being, the more access you have to the Buddhic field, the field of instant knowledge.
Yeah.
And the closer, because you are closer to the origin of consciousness, the origin of our individual consciousness, so
Hmm.
you will be more better able to demonstrate, to manifest that consciousness on a higher level than we are. So
Yeah.
it's all a matter of the evolution of consciousness and
Hmm.
the ability to manifest, to demonstrate that level of attainment. And that's where, for instance, the teachers of humanity, whether it's the Krishna or Buddha or
Yeah.
Jesus or other high initiates, in the fields of science or art, they are able to express more of reality in a way that appeals to masses and masses of people, even after thousands of years, because they touch on a note of reality that we all recognize in the depths of our soul. So that's really what it is about. And
Hmm.
of course, an academic will say, "Hey, but come on, other planets are not inhabited in our solar system
Yeah.
because our probes haven't seen anything there." But that's just a matter of different levels of matter that our science hasn't been able to uh, uh, to pinpoint yet. Science, astrophysics itself says that 96% of the known universe, based on their calculations of the mass of the universe, cannot be proven. They don't know where it is. So there must be a lot of mass around that we simply can't see, and there's no reason to think that it might not be on planets also in our solar system.
Yeah. And for those that say that there is nothing on other planets, they need to change their mind, because NASA is coming out now saying that we have found planets that show there are light spots on the surface that couldn't appears to be cities.
Mm.
So it's going to change here shortly. There's going to be an awareness. And my question here also, all the way back to Adamski, didn't he also talk about there will be a day when all of this will be unveiled? That what he was involved with? I
He
think,
was absolutely convinced that there will be a day when the truth about the reality of the extraterrestrial visitors will be known. But it will depend on humanity's response to the
mhm,
information that is available. And, of course, our governments, not only the US government, but mainly the US government and the military and industrial interests, have done us a great disservice in denying and ridiculing the people who have been trying to educate humanity in this respect.
yeah,
And they've made it a secret, they've made it a mystery, and they've made it for most, until the first Pentagon videos leaks in 2017. The topic wouldn't even be seriously covered in the broadsheet newspapers. It was only when these videos began to be leaked and finally the Pentagon had to admit they were authentic that now you see more serious stories in the New York
yeah,
Times or the Guardian or the Telegraph in London. So it's we've been held back in terms of our knowledge about the reality of
yeah.
these visitors.
Now,
And
Adamski was taken. I have that first book, Flying Saucers Has Landed. It's on the bookshelf somewhere on that wall. Uh, but he was taken to not onto the moon, and I don't think, but around the orbit of it and back to Earth. Isn't that what I seem to remember?
yes, and he has even been taken to orbit Venus and Mars. If Venus, in any case, Mars, I'm not
Hmm.
sure. Um, so well, yes, he's been shown around
Yeah,
the solar system, And perhaps we don't know. Well, he did publish a report in 1962 where he describes he was invited to a interplanetary conference on Saturn in 19 yeah in that year 1962. Of course, everybody, even his closest associates at that time, decided, oh well, this man has lost it.
Yeah.
We can't take him seriously anymore. I've been wasting my time, or maybe his early experiences were authentic, but now he's started to fantasize. But when you read his accounts, they're consistent. There's no fantasy involved there. He may not have been able to explain everything that he experienced in a way that would be 100% correct or accurate. We are not in no position to judge that.
Mm-hmm.
But his experiences and his descriptions are very, very consistent with his earlier experiences.
A lot of the statements that he made has been confirmed later on, and
Yes.
way before the time that it could have been confirmed at his time. So there's something here that you can't get around it.
I think so. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. And
uh,
even NASA now is starting to, with this new, that said there's several planets they found that has these lights on the surface, and with the Webb telescope now is so much better that they can see the planets, and this is puzzling them because according to the rumor on the street is that it can't happen. There are no aliens out there. It might be, but we don't know. And of course, NASA is the biggest scam when it comes to that issue. But this is a global thing. From what I see, you sent me a plate. Yeah, yeah, and there are scientists that explain very simply, yes, UFOs are real and their extraterrestrials are here. And I see now we're down at the bottom of the hour, so let's talk about that information when we get back, because it should confirm to most non-believers that maybe there is something here I should look at. So yes, for those of you that joined us late, we are talking with Gerard Aartsen. He is from the Netherlands and he is a UFO researcher. He is an author. He's written several books on the issue. He also brought out a book by Adamski. It's called The Sea of Consciousness. And he has several others. The Adamski book of UFOs / UAP disclosure. And we're here to help you, UFOs and the Space Brothers. And there's lots of books. Go to Amazon.com and put his name in there and they'll come up. I bet you're going to find one book at least that you can't live without, because I did. So anyway, yeah, here we are again back. But let me share screen and I will bring up this this thing you sent me that is so explanatory. It blew me away that there were so many. So hang on just a second here. I will. Okay, that didn't work too well, so I will go do that. Here we go. All right. I'm sharing sound and video. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, here we have these scientists. They're talking about the UFOs and the extraterrestrials already being here. Talk a little bit about the different people here, because this is good.
Yeah, well, I find it very compelling. And the way this came about, the idea for this compilation came to me when, I had seen the statement from Professor Filipov, Bulgarian professor of astrophysics in 2009, which made the headlines in the UK. We claim that the aliens from space are already among us. They're already here, and they want to help us. And then in 2020, Aage Nost, the Israeli professor of astronautics, said very much the same thing. And none of the media, not even UFO disclosure activists, were making the link. Hey, this has been said before. And then I started looking into it, and I found several. I knew the one which is below which is not visible. It's lower down in the compilation, from Erwin Laszlo, another professor, philosopher of science, systems scientist. Because that interview I had seen on a Dutch YouTube channel, and when I first saw that, his statement blew me away, because he's considered a modern day genius by many, especially in a PBS documentary not too long ago. And he says this: there are reports of extraterrestrials having contact here. Some of the things I know I'm not supposed to say, because they'll never tell me anything more. But I'm certain contact has been made. But, up until recently, you were branded crazy or insane if you would publicly say something like this. And here's a professor who went on the record. And of course, Edgar Mitchell, I came across his statement in a radio interview in the UK in the same year. And then there's this Chinese professor in 2009 who said something in an article, rather uninvited, but it was an article in the Global Times, English language Chinese newspaper, about the UFO conference in China. Apparently, academics are openly involved in UFO research, and they don't have to fear for their reputation or their jobs. And uninvited, he just said, "Yeah, they are living in China. These visitors." Unfortunately, when Professor Filipov came out and said a very similar thing, he was stripped of his academic position, and he then went into crop circle research. But he was a respected scientist. Brian O'Leary, 2012, of course, in Thrive, the movie, many people have seen that. Again, says the same thing. And then Aage Nost most recently. So when you see all these scientists claiming the same thing, not just that UFOs are real, no, that contact has happened. Not on a mass scale, but contact has happened.
Yeah.
That is mind-blowing. That's so compelling, coming from these from these figures.
Yeah. And in fact, 7 or 8 years ago, I also saw a video by, I think it was the Speaker of the House in the European Parliament. He made a statement in one of his talks where he said that we have been in contact with people of other worlds, and they are worried about us because the direction we have taken. So we need to. I forget the last part of what he said, but he made that statement. You may have heard that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I suppose I have, but there have been so many statements. Before we started recording, you mentioned Medvedev in Russia on a hot mic. I've in my latest book, I've compiled various statements from military people also who know about and who have made statements about contact with extraterrestrial visitors. So it's a secret only if you don't want to see, if you don't want to hear. Like the authorities, they don't want us to see, they don't want us to hear. But when you look, there's so much information out there already. And the most compelling thing I find, because since the start of the disinformation campaign in the 1950s, all the contactees, most of all George Adamski, but all the other ones as well, have been declared crazy. It's impossible. There's no evidence that we have been visited. So these people were fantasists or frauds or delusional. And here we have respected scientists who are saying the same thing as George Adamski started when he was the first one to claim, I have I've met with a visitor from space. Let's just put aside the question where exactly they're from, but they're from space, not from Earth. For me, this is a major indication that these contactees of the 1950s were not fantasists. They were not delusional, and they were not crazy.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that I noticed on this list, that this gentleman from China, Zhang Yifang, PhD, professor of physics, he said aliens are living in China. Their intelligence is beyond us. They must have a good reason to choose to stay in Yunnan. That must be where they are. I believe they are friendly and they have no intention of attacking us. So they're living in China. We also have reports of them living in the jungle in South America. They have compounds down there.
Central America, Europe, everywhere.
Yeah. And for those people that say, yeah, there is no such thing, I have a document right here that is, this is on the FBI stationery, where they, about almost 30 years ago now, I got this one from the FBI because I wrote to them and I got it, so I know it's real. And they're saying, yes, there was several flying discs that crashed in New Mexico. And we found the pilots, they're 3 foot tall, and they had metallic suits on them, humanoids, and they explain it. But people don't talk about it. So the disclosure has already happened. It's just that
exactly
every people don't know, or they don't care.
Well, the media, I don't know exactly why, but the media refused to report it. And I'm sad to say many disclosure activists, despite the fact that many of them have helped to bring documents like this to light and brought forward witnesses, experts, it seems as you know, what do you mean by disclosure? The information is there. Should we wait for the government? The governments have been hiding information, probably, technology, extraterrestrial technology, reverse engineered technology. But we don't need the governments to tell us the facts that are out in the open already. We can think for ourselves. Of course, what is necessary is that the governments open up and begin to serve the people rather than serve the industrial military interests.
Yeah, and there are many governments, South America, Mexico has started to open up. The Russians, they released,
oh yes, yeah,
the Navy, they released all their UFO photos on their website. Yeah. People can go look. But the United States and many other countries have turned into prostitutes to the CIA, which is holding the lid on it.
Yes, and of course the reason for that is but the United States is still, economically seen as the most powerful, militarily also most powerful nation in the world. Although I think many people are worrying that will not last very much longer. But this whole tendency towards secrecy is informed by fear of change. The authorities are using people's fear of change, and you can see that now, in many countries also around the world, where politicians are cashing in on people's fears and trying to lock up, close their countries, and keep illegal aliens outside their borders, whereas the whole world is connected already. The consciousness field that lies at the foundation of our objective reality is one. And this, through our modern technology, communication technology, information technology, we know instantly what is happening on the other side of our planet. This has never happened before in the history of humanity. So in a technological sense, we already won. And except in a moral and more conscious, in terms of consciousness, we are not following suit. We are not expressing that oneness, and that is what is putting us in such dire straits. Globally, in every part of the world, we are denying the effects of our overconsumption and exploitation of nature, in terms of the changes in climate. We are denying or closing our eyes to the fact that large segments of humanity are being denied a humane existence through economic colonialism. And these are all expressions of that lack of oneness that puts us in danger. We're putting ourselves in danger.
Yeah.
And the fact, and that's an astronomical fact, our solar system has moved from the past alignment with the constellation of Pisces into an alignment with the constellation of Aquarius. That's an astronomical fact. Thus far, astronomers and other scientists refuse to acknowledge the fact that, even though they acknowledge that the universe is a sea of energy, we live in a sea of energy, they refuse to accept that this energy is impinging not only on our solar system but also on our planet, and may well carry certain characteristics. In the past constellation of Pisces, those characteristics have helped humanity acquire the characteristics of individuality and idealism, that were first, say, symbolized in the story of Jesus, in Jesus of Nazareth in the New Testament, where, for instance, he challenged the authorities of his time to teach people to think for themselves.
Yeah.
Well, we have now come to the end of that cycle, and these characteristics have become crystallized, and we're now living in an age of extreme individualism, and that we're putting ourselves in danger in this way. But there's no way we can escape as a planet, as a human race, the effects of the new energies coming in from the constellation of Aquarius, which require the expression of synthesis and oneness. And it is this fear of the change that is impending, and people sense it, even though they can't put it in words, even though they don't read about it in the newspapers. But we all sense it, that change is inevitable, change is coming. And it's the fear of that change that makes people draw back and in a bad way, and try to protect themselves from the other. But in fact, as the space visitors have told us through the contactees, the other is you. We are all connected, and unless everyone has a humane life with adequate food and housing and healthcare and education, then none of you is safe. We all have to do. We stand together or we fall together. And that is why they are here. And it is also in support of a major event in the evolution of humanity, in the evolution of this world, in the evolution of consciousness. And that's the realization that we are not alone on this planet, that there is a spiritual kingdom that has evolved out of the human kingdom. And a teacher, in the same vein as Krishna or Buddha or Jesus, is ready to step forward and guide humanity into a new age, not founding a new religion, not telling us to become religious or go to the church or the mosque or the temples, but just basically explaining to us what life is really about.
Yeah.
And it is in support of that massive event that the UFOs are here. It's not for nothing that they started to be seen after the first nuclear tests, which was in fact the inauguration of the space age. Because through those atomic tests, we are with nuclear fission. In any case, nuclear fusion is safe, but nuclear fission that touches on the fabric of the universe, or at least the solar system, and that worries the visitors. And also, because the visitors know and they are in contact with our elder brothers, so to speak, the spiritual hierarchy, the masters of wisdom. They know about the fact that there's a teacher ready to step forward, and several contactees, not just Adamski but others as well, have alluded to that fact. It was not their task, it was not their mission to inform humanity about this major event, momentous time in human history. But they've alluded to it. Italian and Mexican contactees, as well as several American contactees.
Yeah, and if we look at the technological advances that we have done over the last 100 years, think of this for just a second. In 1903, the first airplane flew. 66 years later, we were walking on the moon. Do you think that could have happened on its own, or was this some extraterrestrial feeding of information to help out?
Exactly. Yes. I doubt that it would have been able to. Humanity would have been able to make such giant leaps all by itself.
Yeah.
And Adamski has made it clear that the visitors have made several attempts to, they have been in contact, among others, through George Adamski. They have been in contact with the governments of the world, the major governments of the world, and they have offered, a more open exchange of their technology. But their condition was that we would give up the nuclear fission technology in our atomic weapons, the A bomb and the H bomb and what have you, because that is just too dangerous, not just for ourselves, but for the rest of the solar system as well.
Yes.
The outcome of that offer, the fact that it was refused is known. That's history. But nevertheless, they have sacrificed several of their craft, so that we would be able to know more about the technology. We were allowed to find out for ourselves some of their technology, like the well-known examples of the transistor and the laser technology. That are all derived from these wreckages of UFO crashes.
I got a follow-up question to that one. And that is, do you think that we went to the moon in 1969? There's so much evidence and pictures speaking to the contrary. Fake pictures. We know they're fake because but there are probably also real ones. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I don't know if my opinion would matter very much, but I personally am convinced that we have been to the moon. Yes, I have no doubt.
I totally agree with you, but we've been there since the 1950s. Because
that I don't know, but 1969, I know for a fact, yes.
Yeah, we know also that the Americans and the Brits, they got a hold of the Haunebu 2s and probably a Haunebu 1 from the Nazi Germans, and they either back engineered it or they find a complete ship there that they were able to bring. So they had it in 1946, 45. So what they did with it after then, when they were able to fly it, they could perfectly well go to the moon. And I
And
think,
may I ask then, what would be, see, that would have given them a massive advantage over the Soviets,
yeah.
and what would have stopped them from just deciding, okay, now we're going to rule the world?
Well, the thing is that the Russians got at least one of those ships also. And there's Colonel Wendell Stevens. He's probably the most
Yeah, I
knowledgeable
know
person.
Donald
Yeah,
Stevens.
yeah.
Yes.
And I spent some time with him going through some of his pictures and documents written in German and stuff. And yeah, we know the Russians had it, the Americans had it. So that may have been part of why I don't know, I'm just theorizing beyond this, and I shouldn't
Yes.
even go any further
See,
with it.
George Adamski also showed this well-known photo of a Hannibal, as it's called,
Yeah.
um, saucer-shaped craft,
Mhm.
um, and he didn't disclose much about
Yeah.
its
Yeah.
capabilities. And I wonder if the perhaps the Nazis, Germans had witnessed such craft in their skies, and we know they were very good at designing and developing
Yeah.
Warcraft. The V2 was invented by Werner von Braun, who was later um, uh, signed up by the United States,
Yeah.
and he worked for the Gemini and the Apollo programs. Um, for more peaceful purposes, fortunately. So we know the Germans, the Nazis, were, well, perhaps in many ways ahead of the Allies.
Oh, yeah.
But maybe they were working on a design, but who can be sure that they figured out the propulsion? I think it's a lot of speculation, and I personally doubt if there's much veracity to the fact that they were actually being able to operate it in the sense that, in the way that
Yeah.
extraterrestrial craft are operated. Because, the important thing is, and we know that now through, for instance, Stephen Greer and Grant Cameron, but also through these accounts of the original contactees, you need UFOs, flying saucers, are controlled through the mind,
Yeah.
and that is something where humanity has not evolved yet to that point where we can do that.
Exactly.
So that tells me that yes, the Germans may have been working on developing craft that looked like the flying saucers, but they were nowhere near, being able to pilot them in the same
Oh,
way
yeah.
as the
Yeah.
spaces.
Yeah. And in fact, Germany had their own Roswell in 1936.
Many
What,
countries have.
yeah, what if that craft that crashed in Bavaria at the time could have looked like the one that they created the Haunebu from?
Exactly.
So the people that crashed, or the society that crashed the craft there, could have been in contact with Adamski. So
Mm,
the Venusians, they lost one of their crafts in Germany. They could have been, because we know the crash happened, but we don't really have any good look of what it looked like.
yeah, well, I know there's been several attempts to associate Adamski with Nazi Germany or right wing characters in the U.S., and these are based on false insinuations. The visitors from space who come here, they have appeared all over the world. They have no favorites. Their favorite is the human race.
Yeah.
Their message is, we are one. They even call themselves our brothers, the brothers from space, brothers and sisters. And they proclaim the brotherhood of men. And we need to realize that, and we need to express that, demonstrate that in our practical lives on this planet, if we want to avoid our own destruction. And it's coming closer and closer, that destruction, self-imposed destruction, because it's absolutely unnecessary. And it's all for ignorance, and for speculation about enemies and the other, and God knows what. But there's a simple truth, and the simple truth is that you and me are as connected as the brains in the cells in our brains. And in fact, we could consider the individual human beings brain cells in the mind of the planetary entity. And we need to come together. We need to come to our senses. And fortunately, we have help from space visitors. Again, they've appeared all over the world. They have no favorites. Not all planets are evolved to the same extent. There are planets who are less evolved than Earth. But they have not been allowed to visit the planet anymore. They used to in the past, but not anymore, because this is such a crucial time in the history of humanity. And there are actually 3 sources who confirm that there has been placed a ring of light, as it's been called, or a cordon around our planet in protection against these less evolved people from space. Less evolved in terms of consciousness, but still more evolved technologically. So they're not morally as evolved as the people from Venus and Mars, most people from Mars, Saturn, etc. One of these sources was, what's his name again? The Canadian Wilbur Smith, researcher and contactee. Another was Michael Wolff, an American scientist who worked alongside extraterrestrial scientists in the US, and Benjamin Creme, one of the exponents of the Ageless Wisdom, from 1674 until his death in 2016. He worked with some of the space visitors in the 1950s. So there's a protection, a ring of light around our planet, and the people who do come here are allowed to come here because they are here in support of humanity's safe progress into becoming a space civilization and rejoining our brothers and sisters on the other planets in our solar system.
I totally agree. Absolutely. I see we are coming down towards the end of the show here, but could you talk a little bit about your books and also where they can get a hold of you, and maybe emails possibly, or however you want to make contact?
Well, my website and my contact information is on my website, is bgapublications.nl. NL is for Netherlands, but the website is in English. And people can contact me through there. You already mentioned if they type my name in the Amazon, all my books will pop up. My latest book, which I'm particularly happy with, contains 7 exhibits, as they call them.
That's just
there you are.
There you go.
My background is blurred. 7 exhibits showing that whatever is becoming known and confirmed now in terms of UFOs or UAPs was already expressed or included in Adamski's accounts. It's incredible, including the paradigm shift that is taking place. including the concerns about our nuclear tests, including the claims about contact. And I put just to give people a quick idea of what I mean. Let me just unblur so it can be clear. So this is what is being, said by science now. There may be humanity around the universe, everywhere in the universe, and that's in confirmation, and it corroborates what Adamski said in the 1950s. Humanity exists throughout the universe, and so
Yeah.
there's 7 of these chapters in this book.
Okay.
Everything that we know about disclosure, or that has been disclosed, but perhaps not officially, was already published or known by Adamski and people who read his books or who listened to his talks. So that's amazing in itself, I think.
All right. So your website is BGA Publication. Was that it?
Publications.nl. Yes.
Dot
.nl.
NL. Dot
Yes, for
NL
Netherlands.
for the Netherlands. Yeah, there you go. Okay. All right. Well, this has been interesting, and I know that there's much more to talk about in regard to Adamski. I remember, I'm going to take the next 30 seconds and mention this, because some of the people, they question his pictures, but they really shouldn't. I saw a report, because he has a picture of a very long and large cigar-shaped ship in space. That picture was scrutinized, it was investigated, and they couldn't find anything wrong, nothing wrong with that picture. So that is just one, and many others have been scrutinized too.
Yes, and the first chapter in the book that I just showed is about the photographs and why all the claims of his photos being a fraud or being a hoax, having used models. I show that is nonsense, and I give the facts and the reasons why it's his photographs are authentic.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us. And I got one last question for you. And this is a good one. If you could talk to the whole world and the world was listening, what would you tell them?
I would tell people, especially in this day and age, that there is, and it sounds a bit like a cliche, but there is nothing to fear but fear itself. Yes, there are changes coming. Some changes may not be pleasant. Change is always difficult. But the world as we knew it was a very, very unhappy and insecure place where we had to compete for our place under the sun, where we have to pay for every basic human need, which is completely unnecessary. Because if we take the wealth and the richness of Earth's bounty, and we see all of humanity as a family, then there's more than enough to go around for everyone. In terms of food, in terms of housing, basic necessities. We don't all need 2 cars. We don't all need huge houses or swimming pools or what have you. If we all just step back a little bit in terms of consumption and our feeling entitled to things just because we've worked hard or we made this amount of money, let's look at our humanity first. Let's look at our brothers and sisters. Are there people who are dying unnecessarily for lack of food, for lack of healthcare, etc.? Take care of these brothers and sisters. It may sound idealistic, too idealistic, but the time will come when we'll no longer be able to deny the reality of change. And again, there is so much hope because we are being helped by our own elder brothers, the masters of wisdom who have gone before us on the path of return, and the brothers and sisters from space who are here in support of this momentous event in the history of humanity, that we will be reconnected with our spiritual reality.
It is happening right now. And I thank you very much for being with us. And until next time, be good to each other.
It was a true pleasure, Aage. And until we meet again, let me know if whenever you want me back on your show, I'll be happy to join you.
Yeah, let's set that up because there's so much more to talk about.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.